Citizenship is the issue, in a way, it's the only issue. July 12, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. A lot of people are blowing gaskets about Mr. Trump's executive order regarding citizenship records. Citizenship is a dire issue, but only partially because of all the illegal aliens pouring over our borders. When the corporate Territorial Constitution was adopted in 1868, 9 million Americans, a huge section of the population at that time, was deliberately disenfranchised under the infamous 14th Amendment. This Great Disenfranchisement arose because the Pope's municipal government sided with the Confederate States of America. Citizens of the United States, as opposed to United States citizens, were denied the ability to vote in territorial elections. That prohibition has never been lifted. Technically, Nancy Pelosi and most of her supporters are enemies under the 14th Amendment, subject to arrest, and not eligible to vote. If William P. Barr can read, the Trump administration has grounds to pull another great disenfranchisement, not that these people ever had the right to vote under the 14th Amendment anyway. They've been allowed to, and haven't been prosecuted for doing so, but the 14th Amendment is clear on the point that it is a crime for them to vote in territorial elections. What has happened over time is that the civil government has passed itself off as the civilian government, and the prohibitions that were meant to be applied against the municipal citizenry, have instead been misapplied to the general populace, us, the state nationals and state citizens, who aren't supposed to vote in territorial elections for completely different reasons. The territorial government has been engaged in a de facto mercenary war with the municipal government for decades, but rather than fight each other, they have combined forces to prey upon the rest of us. Now that we have stuttered awake and objected to this, locating the real enemy has begun, as it has to. It's like parliamentary procedure, once the question has been called, it has been called. So fasten your seat belts. There are other reasons that the citizenship question is crucial. Here's a sampling. The territorial United States government constantly touts itself as a democracy. A democracy needs a mandate of 51% to govern. They can't ever achieve a mandate until and unless they know how many citizens they have. By international law, the territorial United States can only impose upon and presume upon its own citizenry. We, American state nationals and American state citizens, are third parties who have nothing to do with their mercenary squabbles. We are supposed to be properly identified as internationally protected persons under the Geneva Conventions. The fact that we have instead been deliberately misidentified as one form or another of territorial or municipal U.S. citizen, is both a crime and a disgrace. If Mr. Trump wants to do the right thing and run the territorial government according to Hoyle and Doyle, then he must not rely on the falsified citizenship records that have been kept by the agencies. He needs to come all the way clean, tell people what citizenship really means, honestly describe the kinds of citizenship there are in this country, and let Americans step forward under conditions of full disclosure and identify themselves as 1. Non-citizens, includes state nationals, 2. Territorial citizens, United States citizens, 3. Municipal citizens, citizens of the United States, 4. Permanent legal residents, foreigners granted asylum, 5. State citizens. Our form of government requires state citizens to maintain a singular citizenship obligation to their state of the Union, which is why we cannot vote in territorial government elections. The territorial government allows dual citizenship, but at least one of those citizenship obligations must be to the territorial government. The municipal government also allows dual citizenship, but anyone with this citizenship is prohibited from voting in territorial elections by the 14th Amendment. Millions of people who are citizens of the United States have been deliberately with malice aforethought misidentified as citizens of the United States, the municipal government, instead. This makes it appear that we are enemies of the territorial government, and that we are involved as enemies in their perennial hard scrabble with the municipal government, and leaves us subject to all manner of abuses and false claims in commerce. This international crime has to stop. We must be accorded the protections of the Geneva Conventions and assisted in our efforts to correct the falsified records and claim our actual political status, but the only way that this good and necessary result can be accomplished is by being honest about the situation, explaining it to the whole population, and then letting people self-identify under conditions of full disclosure. A final area where the issue of citizenship comes push to shove arises under various United Nations treaties and conventions. Many UN treaties require that the signatories agree to only conduct tests of weapons and geoengineering, weather warfare, and similar research on their own domestic population. Currently, millions of Americans are being subjected to unconscionable contracting processes and are being targeted as guinea pigs in various Department of Defense weapons and population control tests, all based on the false premise that these Americans are part of the U.S. domestic population and are U.S. citizens of one kind or another, when they aren't. The U.S., whether defined as the territorial government or the municipal government or even if and when the original federal government structure is restored, is a foreign entity with respect to us and our states of the Union. It was set up that way from the beginning and it is still that way now. Americans living and working in the states of the Union are not domestic with respect to the federal United States, so when we are misidentified and targeted as U.S. citizens and used as guinea pigs by federal agencies and defense contractors, another international crime and treaty violation is taking place. Think of all the nasty experimental drugs and weapons that were first tested on our military personnel being applied in the same way to our civilian population. If it was outrageous and immoral and unacceptable that they exposed our boys to Agent Orange and experimental drugs and brainwashing, how much worse and broader spectrum is it that our whole population has been exposed to nanobit and coal ash pollution via chemtrails? Suffered devastating floods and earthquakes due to scalar tests? Been poisoned by adding fluorine and chlorine to our drinking water? Lead in our vaccines and dental amalgams? Being a U.S. citizen of either stripe exposes us to life-threatening misery, unjust laws, punitive taxation, and many, many other undisclosed ills. The phrase, "misery loves company," comes to mind. Nobody in their right mind would voluntarily and knowingly accept either form of U.S. citizenship in preference to their birthright political status, at least not as the territorial and municipal governments are currently managed, which is perhaps part of the reason why the perpetrators have sunk to such low levels of moral depravity and breach of trust. It was originally an honor and a knowing sacrifice to serve our country as a member of either the territorial or municipal governments. Americans undertaking the dual citizenship required by either the military or the civil service were required to undergo a lengthy process of notices and to prove their good moral character and to explicitly and repeatedly affirm their decision to enter federal citizenship status. See the First Naturalization Act. Today we still recognize the sacrifices of the military and the civil service, but fail to recognize our own. Millions of Americans have been commandeered, kidnapped, press-ganged, suffered enslavement, peonage, and unlawful conversion of their assets, unjust taxation, false arrest, and confiscation of their assets, in the biggest identity theft scheme in history, and it all revolves around the issue of citizenship. Mr. Trump has started down a long road, but it is a necessary road if he is to fulfill the offer he made in his first inaugural address, an offer to give this country back to the American people. We heard, acknowledged, and accepted his offer. And now all we have to do is agree on making a clean breast of the citizenship issues and how best to serve the people of this country and deliver the good faith service they deserve. A great many international efforts are being made and much pressure is being brought to bear on the U.S. military to straighten itself up and do the right thing. That includes issuing the correct Geneva Convention identifications that American state nationals and American state citizens are owed. It includes assisting our efforts to get our civilian government fully reconstructed and operational again. It includes full disclosure of the issues surrounding citizenship. Freedom begins at home. Thank you, Mr. Trump. Now go the final mile and don't rely on the falsified records of the federal agencies to provide the information you need. This issue, citizenship, requires a national plebiscite, a national discussion, and full disclosure.